You're listening to RealAgriculture.com. Get real, get connected.
Hi again, Debra Murphy here. I've got to say, one of the best parts of my job is getting the chance to ask questions everybody else might be just a little afraid to ask. Sometimes that's because they're controversial, but much of the time it's because they're fairly simple. One such question I had was simply, do ranchers put enough stock into the importance of segregating livestock that might be injured or ill? And so today I sat down with Eugene Janzen. He's a professor at the University of Calgary, and also he was a facilitator of a workshop here at the pre-conference to the UCVM's conference, Beef Cattle Conference, which starts tomorrow in Calgary. And so we sat down and we talked about that, and we talked about the importance of segregating animals, how many pens you need, what you should consider when putting an animal in a different treatment pen or a pen that you can keep an eye on their symptoms. And then also we talked a little bit about if you are considering euthanizing an animal, how to know whether or not it is still salvageable. So take a listen to that conversation and keep your eye on Real Agriculture, because I will be here in Calgary for the next 2 days covering the Beef Cattle Conference and hopefully bringing you lots of great content. You spoke a lot about segregating animals. Feedlots tend to put a pretty big emphasis on this. Should more ranches?
I think the federal government would like most ranchers to have some sort of a biosecurity plan in place. And I think mostly what's important, if you purchased animals, you probably should be careful about just mixing them immediately with the rest of your group. And we have evidence of in Alberta of where people haven't done that and have got into trouble. So that's probably the most important thing for ranchers to remember about segregating animals, is if you buy something, boy, be careful where you put them.
Mm-hmm. As far as like sick pens go and segregating animals if they become sick after that, how many should we have? Because you talked about chronic pen, sick pen, home pen, and then a leper pen.
Probably for a ranch,
yeah.
The only thing you really need is you probably need a place that's convenient so that you can treat something or watch something. So it's not the same as a feed yard where you've got animals coming from all over the place, from many different home pens, a hospital, and with accompanying sick pens. That's probably for convenience as well. I'm not sure that it's nearly as critical on a ranch to have the same things in place that you would in a feed yard.
Okay. In a feed yard, how do you determine which animals go in which of those many pens? Like if we're talking chronic versus sick pen.
I think the stock attendants, they usually, depending on what their treatment protocol is, most of the time nowadays the treatment protocol is if it's got a high temperature, then we give it a sustained action antimicrobial and we send it home. We don't want it to stay in the sick pen. So the sick pen would be animals that are lame and need to be treated 3 days in a row, things like that. If they've had several episodes of treatment, and again, it depends a little bit on what their veterinarian has said as enough. Mm-hmm. If it may be 2 episodes, in some places it may even be 4 episodes. Once you've exhausted all treatment possibilities, then those animals are put in the computer as chronics, and they would go into the chronic pen. And a chronic pen would contain intractable treatment animals from the entire feedlot.
Mm-hmm. So, and if it gets even worse than that, so we're considering euthanizing an animal, how do we know if we can ship it and it can be slaughtered, or it should just be euthanized and properly disposed of? A few things, I guess we can start with just shipping. How do you know if you're okay to ship an animal?
A shipping animal would be an animal that has been properly withdrawn from all treatments, and it would be an animal that the butcher could turn into groceries. If it's an animal that's very thin and small, it's probably not appropriate to consider that animal for salvage. So most of the time, those animals that are sent to salvage are heavier, they've been further on feed, and they're properly withdrawn. So that would be the first group. The second group would be those animals that need to be euthanized right now. And of course, the typical one would be an animal with a broken leg. And the rules usually are in most places that once you recognize the leg is broken, you shouldn't allow it to live more than 2 hours. So if you can't get a butcher or you can't get it to a butcher in 2 hours, then it probably should just be destroyed and become a loss. Other animals that you might consider destroying immediately would be if an animal has been in such severe respiratory distress that it can't even eat. It's spending all its time breathing, it doesn't drink, and you've given it sufficient time with treatment, and usually the criteria in a feed yard would be 2 days. If with 2 days of treatment you haven't reduced the difficult breathing at all, it should be destroyed. Let me think, what else? An animal that can't get up, that's down. In the summertime, you can probably afford to treat that animal for a longer period of time. But in winter, when it's 40 below, most feed yards would destroy the animal immediately because it's inhumane to leave the animal lying out there. And probably the other thing that's critical is if it's sitting, you can probably leave it alone longer than if it's lying flat on its side. If it's lying flat on its side, that probably tells you it cannot control its body temperature and it will die of hypothermia. No animal deserves to die of hypothermia. So if it's sitting up, you probably have a little longer. You can probably treat it and see how it responds. But if it's lying flat on its side and with treatment, immediate treatment, you don't get it to respond, it should probably be destroyed. And that's probably what we would see in most feed yards.